Medieval Europe. Suddenly, there are people on the streets who start dancing and can't stop. No food, no water, no pleading. Nothing works. They dance until they're exhausted, until they faint, to the point of death. This is not fiction. This is a real epidemic that has swept through towns and villages, claimed hundreds of lives, and left behind only one question. Why? Mass insanity? A toxin? Or something ancient that could come back? Summer, the narrow streets of a medieval town, the stone walls of the houses, the smell of bread, the ringing of church bells. Everything seems ordinary until you see what's happening in the main square. People are dancing, but it's not a celebration. Their faces are distorted. Some are laughing for no reason. Some are crying. Some move like a marionette without any rhythm. They spin, unable to stop. Someone falls down, exhausted, but their body continues to twitch in a strange dance. Someone convulses. Somebody dies. No, this is not a scene from a horror film. This is the reality of medieval Europe. The dancing plague is one of the most mysterious phenomena in human history. It swept through Germany, France, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Italy between the 13th and 17th centuries, leaving behind hundreds of dead bodies and even more questions. What was it? Mass hysteria? A poisonous mold? A collective madness? Or something else? Historians have called this phenomenon variously. In German chronicles, Tanzwut, which can be translated as dancing rage. In Latin, chorea contagiosa, or epidemia saltatoria, popularly known simply as the dance of death. The first documented outbreak occurred in the city of Aachen, modern Germany, around 1270. A few dozen people began suddenly dancing in the streets. For no reason, no music, no rest. They danced for 3, 4, sometimes 5 days straight, until they dropped dead. Later, in 1333, in Alsace, several hundred. And the largest epidemic occurred in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518, and entered the history books as the strangest urban disaster of the Middle Ages. July 1518. The center of the city of Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire. A woman named Frau Trophäa walks out into the street and starts dancing. Just like that. No music. Passers-by laugh at first. They think it's a joke. Then they get wary, because she doesn't stop. Dancing in the daytime, she dances at night. They try to take her away. She breaks free. They try to put her down. She convulses and keeps going. After a few days, others join her. Dozens at first, then hundreds. According to eyewitness descriptions, up to 400 people filled the streets of the city, all of them dancing, without explanation, no consent, just couldn't do otherwise. The Chronicle of the Time states, "They moved as if to the sound of hell. Their faces were contorted with agony and rapture. Some laughed, others screamed. Their hearts were bursting out of their chests, while their feet kept hitting the stones of the pavement." The local authorities were in a panic. Doctors didn't understand what was happening. Priests were reciting prayers. No one could stop this dance of death. How many people died is not known. Chronicles speak of 50 dead in the first week alone. Causes of death: stroke, heart attack, heat stroke, exhaustion. But most importantly, no one understood why it all started. Scientists argue to this day. Dozens of theories have been put forward. Here are the main ones. The first is ergotism. Ergot is a fungus that affects cereal crops, especially rye. It produces alkaloids that cause hallucinations, spasms, convulsions, and even gangrene. Some ergot substances are related to LSD. If contaminated rye was used to bake bread, whole villages could be plunged into psychosis. There are chronicles describing how peasants saw demons, felt their limbs burning, and started moving to dull the pain. But ergotism has other symptoms: severe pain, cramps, tissue necrosis, and in the case of the dancing plague, most victims didn't complain of pain. They just couldn't stop moving. The second theory is mass hysteria. The Middle Ages was a time of fear. Plagues, wars, famines, religious conflicts. People lived under constant stress. Psychologists say that in such conditions, the psyche can fail. Especially in crowded cities, religious pressure and social instability. So-called mass hysteria is a form of collective psychosis. One person starts behaving strangely, and others subconsciously copy his behavior. There are analogies in our time: dancing flash mobs, religious ecstasies, even laughter in student dormitories, passing from one person to another. All of this is social contagion. But how do we explain that people were dying to dance? Is it possible to switch off the consciousness so much that the heart could not withstand it? The third theory is religious mysticism. In the Middle Ages, it was believed that illness could be not physical, but spiritual, that the soul becomes infected, and the body becomes subject to dark forces. Some chronicles indicate that the dancers were supposedly possessed, saw Saint Wit, the patron saint of those suffering from convulsions and seizures. The phrase Saint Wit's dance even appeared as a synonym for illness. People believed that only a ritual dance could exorcise the evil spirit, and they themselves, in ecstasy, started this dance, unable to stop. In some places, churches organized dancing chapels, hoping that the ritual, brought to the end, would stop the attack. But more often than not, it ended in death. Was it exorcist psychodrama? Or a dark mystical ritual that got out of control? Some sources mention that at the height of the epidemic in Strasbourg, the authorities tried to invite musicians. Does that sound absurd? But the logic was that if people were forced to dance, maybe they should be helped to do it rhythmically, to at least avoid injuries. A platform was placed in the central square, a band was brought there, and barrels of water were placed to keep the dancers awake. All this in an attempt to order the chaos. But the result was disastrous. According to the chronicles, the dancing only intensified. People, hearing drums and bagpipes, seemed to fall into a trance. They began to move faster, stronger, more desperate. Observers wrote, "The music entered their bodies like a demon. They heard no words, felt no fatigue, until they fell dead, with a smile of madness on their faces." After this performance, the musicians were forbidden to play, and the chapels were again filled with prayers and incense. These episodes have given rise to another theory. A fourth theory is ritual possession through sound. Some cultures use music as a means of entering an altered state of consciousness. African shamans, Indian Sufis, Siberian sorcerers all use rhythm to enter a trance. Some anthropologists have suggested perhaps there was something similar in Europe. Perhaps it was an echo of an ancient ritual, going back to pre-Christian times, when dance was a connection to spirits, a way of healing, a sacrifice, or a method of contact. If this is true, then the plague of dancing is not a disease, but a flash of an ancient code, accidentally activated in the minds of people broken by fear, hunger, religion. But then, who activated this code? And this is where an even more sinister hypothesis comes into play. The fifth theory is something contagious but invisible. Modern neurophysiologists have asked the question, could there be a form of infection that does not kill the body directly, but affects behavior? We know that the rabies virus causes aggression and seizures. Some parasites change animal behavior. Ants climb up a blade of grass to be eaten. Psychiatrists are studying transmitted behavior syndromes in schizophrenia and Tourette's syndrome. What if, in medieval times, there was a virus or toxin affecting certain parts of the brain associated with movement, rhythm, automaticity? What if dance is a symptom? Like epilepsy, like Huntington's disease, only massive and catastrophic. And now for the creepy part. The dance of death was not limited to Strasbourg. It was repeated over and over again. In 1499, 300 people danced in Appenzell, Switzerland, for 10 days at a time. In 1470 at Metz, France, 500 men. In 1502, in Württemberg, 12 villages were swept by a dancing pestilence. Sometimes people were infected simply by watching the dancers. Sometimes after confession, where the priest called it a punishment. Sometimes after dreams. There's a description where a man woke up and said, "Saint Wit has entered my foot," and started dancing. Died 24 hours later of exhaustion. Some bodies were found with dislocated joints, torn ligaments, broken bones, but the faces were frozen in a smile or a scream. One chronicle states, "Their bodies shook like marionettes on invisible strings. They did not beg for mercy. They were begging not to stop. Whatever it was, it kept them going until the end." By the 17th century, the cases began to disappear. Fewer and fewer and fewer. The last episodes are recorded in Italy and southern France. After that, silence. What happened? Some say sanitary conditions improved. The contaminated rye disappeared. Gone were the religious fears. Fear was replaced by enlightenment. Others, that the plague of dancing did not disappear, but simply changed shape. Today we see episodes of mass hypnosis, hysteria, religious ecstasy, concerts where people fall into a trance. And some say it's sleeping, waiting, and one day it will start again. When the circumstances, the stress level, the sound environment coincide, and the ancient code is activated again, then we'll see people walking down the streets again and start dancing. No music, for no reason, to the point of death. The plague of dancing left a deep mark on European culture. It inspired artists, poets, playwrights. Its echoes can be seen especially vividly in the art of the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The famous Dance of Death symbol appears, Totentanz in German. This is an allegorical scene where death, in the form of a skeleton, invites to dance representatives of all classes: king, knight, monk, merchant, beggar. The message is that death comes to everyone. No one can refuse her. And although the Dance of Death is often interpreted as a metaphor, more and more researchers believe that the true source of the plot was real episodes of the plague of dances. People literally saw their neighbors, friends, and family members dancing themselves to death. This left an imprint in the subconscious, turning into images. 15th century frescoes show processions of dancing skeletons dragging the living behind them. This is both an illustration of horror and an attempt to explain the inexplicable. Even in musical culture, the plague of dancing has left a strange mark. Some ancient ballads and hymns contain rhythms that seem to mimic the inexorable repetition of steps, a quickening of tempo, and a cliffhanger. In the folklore of southern Germany, there are references to a cursed melody that could supposedly be played by a traveling musician. Anyone who hears it starts dancing and can't stop. An echo of an old version of the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin? It could be. Interestingly, during outbreaks of the dancing plague, musicians were sometimes accused of witchcraft. Allegedly, it was their playing that awakened the demon of the dance. Some of them were banished, and in some places even executed. And here comes another dark hypothesis. What if dance really can be used as a weapon? It sounds strange, but if we remember how certain rhythms affect heartbeat, breathing, brain activity, it becomes not so fantastic. Modern research in the field of psychoacoustics confirms sound can induce trance states, motor impulses, even convulsions. And if you apply this knowledge in the conditions of medieval Europe, with its ignorance, religious fear, and poverty, you could provoke mass hysteria even without real magic. What if someone knew? What if someone used it? The chronology of dance plague outbreaks often coincides with moments of extreme social instability. Famine, natural disasters, the beginning or end of a bubonic plague epidemic. In 1409th year, a terrible drought. In 1502, mass crusades. In 1518, religious unrest in Alsace. It is at such moments that there is mass fear, the need for ritual, for a collective outlet. Perhaps the plague of dancing is the cry of a society that can no longer contain pain and fear. But who or what triggers this cry? Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and their followers often spoke of the collective unconscious, the ancient images, archetypes, sleeping in each of us. One such archetype is ritual movement, dancing as a form of addressing the gods or spirits. It has been embedded in us since primitive times. We dance when we rejoice. We dance when we enter ecstasy. We dance when we can't speak. Jung wrote that mass psychoses are outbursts of the collective unconscious when society can't cope with the tension. And if we apply this theory to Strasbourg in 1818, what do we see? A city exhausted by disease and hunger. A people tired of being silent. A society in which you can't complain. You can't shout. You can't get angry, because everything is explained by sins. So there is only one thing left to do: dance. And dance becomes the only language available to all. A language without words, but with a terrible meaning. Here's the big question. Is the plague of dance an exclusively medieval phenomenon? Or could it make a comeback? Modern scientists say yes, it can, only in a different form. Today we see mass hysteria on social networks. People repeat movements, phrases, reactions without thinking. Outbreaks of strange diseases, when a group of teenagers suddenly start twitching, like in the US or Canada in the early 2000s. Or mass media flash mobs, where millions of people dance the same dance. Some for fun, some because they can't stop. The dance is still with us. It's changed form, but not the essence. And maybe if there is a new crisis, environmental, social, informational, we will again see streets filled with bodies that move to death. Perhaps what scares us is not the fact that people once danced to death. It's the fact that they couldn't stop. In a modern world where control is a cult, where every movement can be tracked, where everything is subject to logic and algorithms, the idea that a person can lose control and fall into an ancient dance, not of their own free will, sounds almost like an insult to our intelligence. But it has happened before, hasn't it? And if it happened once, then it can happen again. The plague of dancing wasn't just a physical phenomenon. It was a mirror of the fear of the age, fear of God, of disease, of death, fear of self. Dance, like laughter, is something that bursts from within. It is not a learned ritual. It is not words that can be edited out. It is an inner concussion that becomes the body. When a person dances, he ceases to be only the mind. It becomes an emotion, an impulse, a rhythm. And if this rhythm is not dictated by him, but by something else, we don't know what it was. And we may never know, but we do know that people were dying because they couldn't stop moving. We do know that doctors were powerless, the church was confused, and society was gripped by terror. And we know that it happened again, and again. History, as we know, is written by the victors. But the plague of dances is an episode where no one won. Not science, not religion, nor common sense. That's why it's tried to be forgotten, not included in textbooks, mentioned as a footnote, as an oddity, as a curiosity. But it was. And she left behind dozens of cities, hundreds of graves, and thousands of frightened eyes. Which means she deserves to be talked about, to be remembered, not as a horror story, but as a reminder that man is not always the master of his body. Why did people start dancing at the same time, in the same places? Why did they couldn't stop even when they died? Why did it happen at certain historical periods as if on a schedule? What set this mechanism in motion? What made them move, scream, fall, get up, and dance again until their heart stopped? Was it toxins, a virus, a psychosis, or something else? Maybe it was a form of ancient energy, an energy that we've forgotten how to recognize, that lives deep within the collective consciousness, and which resurfaces when humanity reaches its limits. We think we've become smarter, more civilized, more rational. We are no longer subject to superstition. We treat depression with pills. We meditate. We manage ourselves. But anyone who's seen a crowd at a stadium, anyone who's watched trance music at concerts, anyone who's felt music take over the body, knows that man is not as far from the Middle Ages as he thinks he is. And maybe one day, in some town, on some street, someone will stop and dance. Not for TikTok, not for likes. It's just 'cause they can't do it any other way. And someone will join in, and then someone else. And again, we'll see bodies start to move. Without meaning, no stopping, until the last breath. And then history won't repeat itself. It will continue. If you saw someone start dancing in the street, no music, no reason, would you join in, or would you run away? Thank you for watching to the end. Share this clip with those who are willing to look at the past not with a smirk, but with respect and concern. And write in the comments, do you believe that the plague of dancing can return?